economy in the restaurant?
Well, when I first started, as far as coming up here to Milwaukee and cooking, I was on the board for Slow Food. And we were trying to get restaurateurs aware of local food and what would that entail on their part. And the first two questions they would always ask me is how much more is it going to cost and how much more time is it going to be, and I had not a good answer for that. It was more and more. And not a good thing that restaurateurs want to hear, so add on the bottom line of more and more. And so, does it change the economy of a restaurant? Certainly. If I went to a broadline purveyor right now and switched everything over from that, I can give my staff a $2 raise across the board, every member. I employ 38 people across from the restaurant, the culinary school, the home delivery, and the RSA, and across the board that's a huge economic impact. So people that work for us understand that. They understand slave labor, yeah. But it's just, they understand the idea, the concept behind it, and they're the type of people that are cooking in a restaurant are not going to be going to a fast food chain and then coming in to work for service. So they understand the implications on a number of different levels, which is always easy, and it's great for staff retention because in the 4.5 years Braze has been around, a lot of our key employees have been there from the very beginning, which is really something that I've been in a number of restaurants that, it's hard to keep people for 3 months. Yeah. And so for us, the short-term answer is yes. It increases both, but I mean there are other ways around it, and that's why we created the RSA, and it works on both sides from Dan's perspective of both a restaurateur and a farmer. We work on both sides to make efficiencies on that to make it affordable to use. We don't put white tablecloths on the tables. That's an expenditure that we can jettison off. There's a lot of other things that we can go into it if time permits. But
yeah. Do you want to speak to it too? Because you have a big perspective, a broad perspective from farming and from chefdom.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, I hate to say it, but our system is somewhat convoluted just for the sense that we run both a processing state licensed meat facility and a restaurant. So for us, whole animal utilization is just kind of second nature. But when I started at the Madison Club, just as Dave said, both our food costs and labor costs went up until we found efficiencies within our systems to really manage it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, our employees benefited from it. They were able to grasp onto something more than just learning how to cook. They were learning how to be sustainable within a food system, and also they got very involved on the farming side of things. And started walking the farmers market with us and building relationships with the direct farmers. And connecting with our local food system and our local economy really upped our business and started to make us a little bit more popular in the local area, which helped the Madison Club out, I would say, as far as member retention and really brought in more visibility to the food. So yes, our costs went up slightly, but at the end of the day, our quality went up, and therefore our business went up. So it was a win-win for both sides of the fence once they started seeing the system work. And now that we're into more of an independent restaurant setting, the employees that we initially took on were all employees that were very interested in the system, and we have sous chefs that go out and farm and bring produce in, and other members of our staff that will actually literally go out and forage or grow flowers. So it's just more of a holistic sense of how everyone's approach to working in the restaurant, which again in turn makes our customers really at the end of the day see the quality and gets our staff very excited to promote this whole thing and work within the system. So at the end of the day, it's definitely becomes a win-win for both sides, even though it does cost a few more percentage points, more, maybe a little bit more on the food cost side. Labor we see to make a little bit more efficiency on, and it probably is because our check average, our customer count is a little bit higher.
Right. Jan, do you want to pick up on this? Because one of the things that sometimes people have apprehension about is you can just call a purveyor and you get what you need, right? You just check the form, you pick up the phone, right. And gosh, how do I plan my menu? How do I do this? And also, we've heard in these types of conversations at this event, well, we're in a more conservative community, so they're not ready for the menu to change as often, or for ingredients that dishes they're not as familiar, which I just don't buy that. But
I don't either. I think when you look across the country, a lot of restaurants are doing it. We're all kind of looking at menus in the same way. There are some established places that have a more static menu or whatever, but I do think that as an industry and as a consumer, also myself, I enjoy going to restaurants that are going to have somewhat of a fluid menu, and everybody for our customers, they like to see the fact that we're buying something local, or that it's a seasonal type menu where you're not going to see something that just doesn't make sense. I always go to tomatoes in the middle of winter and that kind of thing. Obviously, there are some growers that do the hot house, the hoop house tomatoes, and actually those have been pretty good. But when I first started at Barossa and was buying, I started buying from Lynn at Yuppie Hill when all she had was eggs. And then it was like, okay, now we're gonna do chickens. And it was difficult to get all that you needed.
Sorry, everybody.
It was difficult to get the product in the amount that I needed, but she grew, and as she grew, we were able to do that. So it was nice to work with these farmers at the beginning, and then of course when Dave approached me with the RSA, which made so much sense, to go through and look at a list and go, here's the farms that we have, here's the produce we have, here's the meat that we have, and be able to work at that, and also to be able to go, well, are we going to be able to get goat? Can we get, and Dave did such a great job building that and sourcing that for us. So it does make it a lot easier as a chef and an owner. You wear these couple of hats. You don't always have all the time in the world to make 15 phone calls a day to get your product in. So having something like the RSA was a great help.
Yeah.
It was such a difference. But as I said, I still enjoy that connection that I made with those farmers when I was dealing with them one-on-one. But they're busy too. They don't have time to field everybody's phone call.
Well, that's I think been one of the other apprehensions that people have expressed is, gosh, we don't have the time. And you've all lived it, where you talk to 8, 12, 30 farmers in a day or 2 days. And you scale that into a more concise thing. But how does that work? I've never run a restaurant. Do you really have the time? Is it one of those things like, oh gosh, I just don't have the time to be in a book club because when would I read that book? But then when you make the time, your life is enriched because you're reading fascinating things, or you have better ingredients.
Well, I think that it's our job. It's our job to do it. So.
Yeah, I think there's misconceptions. Gabrielle Hamilton, chef of Prune and a great author, she wrote a little article in one of the food magazines a number of years back, kind of debunking the myth of the super chef. Kind of like they wake up at 4 in the morning, they go to a fish market, they buy their fish, they go to the farmer's market, they buy their stuff, they go back to the restaurant. They handle 14 interviews, they're on TV, they're cooking on the line every night, they're doing this, that, and the other, they don't go to bed till 5 in the morning, but then they get up at 4 in the morning, and then, it's just like, she wrote this wonderful piece on that, and it was like, there's just not enough time in the day to do things that we want to do, and to the level that we want to do that, and chefs are control freaks. That's what we want to do, and that's, so it's hard to jettison some of that, but then on the same token, to do it for efficiency's sake, because we always want, like we always said with the RSA when we started that, we want chefs to chef and farmers to farm, and that's what we want. And then there are farmers that are outside that gap that are going to be small enough that can deliver to the restaurants themselves, or are close enough to the urban center that can do that themselves. And we don't want to stand in the way of that.
Yeah.
And so that's one good thing, but as far as the time constraints of that, it just requires a lot of effort. To do things that you have some very typical restaurants that are up here. It's not the norm of a restaurant having an arm with processing. It's not norm for a restaurant to have a culinary school and an arm in distribution. That's not the norm. When I started the RSA, there was no other restaurant doing that in the country. And there's not too many. Probably the only restaurant I know that has a processing. Only farm and its own processing with it. So that's two great examples of what's shown here in Wisconsin, what's happening and stuff. And I would just prefer time elsewhere.
How do you make the time? Because you have the farmer's market out your door, so that's a little bit easier in Madison. It's such a food-centric community. The Fresh Farm Atlas, which I hope you're all familiar with, was really started by the Food Group in that part of the state. And that's a compendium, 5 regions of farms that sell to consumers and will sell to restaurants, but are growing in a very conscious, sustainable way. For southeastern Wisconsin, there's over 100 listed. But anyway, How do you split the time out?
I mean, at this point in time, we were surrounded by very good people. But in the beginning, it was definitely, it was one step at a time. Just like anything else, it's definitely a very intimidating thing to confront in the beginning. Especially, when I walked into, Madison Post, as my example. It was a Cisco or Reinhardt-driven restaurant. And it was just, one step at a time. I wanted to get fresh herbs. And then we just found one farm with fresh herbs, and that farmer then became a friend and a peer, and just a normal business partner. And they would be knocking on our door instead of us going out and trying to seek out where the best herbs are coming from. That lends itself into a small herb garden that they helped us plant. And then it was the next thing as far as taking on peppers or tomatoes. And it was just one step at a time, and now it's over a decade. We have our tomato source, we have our berry source, we have our herb source, and it's just very, very refreshing and very fulfilling to have farmers coming to you and sharing their excitement just as you're as excited about a menu. And that's been my learning curves. There's really, hasn't been, unfortunately, a chef, role model for me in Madison. The role models have been farmers, and that's where I've had more of my education come through, is just sitting down and talking to somebody. When I go to someone's stand, just having a discussion of what's successful in your field, what do you have a surplus of, how can we work together to make us both stronger. And I'd say at the end of the day, that's really been what's probably been the most success for us.
And I learned this filming with you, Dave. It seems that the farmers, they want to grow what you want to buy. So, I remember doing the cycling episode, and we were at a farm where you said, those 3 acres are beets, basically. And you had literally given them the seed money.
Yes.
For the seeds, to grow the beets. Because you're like, look, I have restaurants that want beets longer than they can get them from all the typical names. So we'll sell out. And the farmer went, great, I grow stuff. This is cool. You're telling me what to grow that you will buy that will then go to people who will appreciate it. It seems, and I know if you're not doing any real seasonal, regional, what have you right now, it can seem like swinging the Queen Mary, right, 180 degrees, but you don't have to suddenly be Heritage Tavern or Meritage or Braised. You can work in, some herbs and then some tomatoes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we've worked in restaurants on a number of different scales in RSA. We started with 4 restaurants, we're now 35 businesses in Milwaukee. And some we've just told, like, okay, how do you run your restaurant? Oh, we have a menu, and then on weekends we do a special. Okay, great, let's tackle that. What's the special you want to do? And really, like, let's look at this and let's see what you want to do. Do you want to, the thing that people always look at is the center of the plate, which is, I think that is changing in our mindset, which is a good thing overall. But the first thing they look at is the protein in the center of the plate. So let's look at that, let's conquer that. And the great thing about the RSA, what we try to do is, if one restaurant only has 30 seats, well, they're not going to be able to go through a whole pig. But that way, we bring a pig in, we butcher it. Well, the other restaurants can use the other remainder part of that pig. And so then the efficiency is inventory is way down, efficiencies are way up. We can then keep the cost down because we're not storing things for once on the calendar year. Yeah. And so that's how, for some restaurants, it's just starting on that small level, just starting with that. Then let's look, okay, what else do you want to put with that protein? Let's look, in Dan's example of herbs or lettuce and vegetables and getting into that. And then they start seeing that, okay, well, how much do I order? Well, look at what you have and look at how many you sell and kind of look at that. But if you sell too little or too much, don't worry about it. If you buy too much, we'll buy it back. If you have a little bit that you need more, we'll come over and deliver on a Saturday for you. Not a big deal. And so the idea was just to make it accessible for restaurateurs to do that. And so that was.
I think you're right. It's like baby steps. I remember when I first started buying from Growing Power, and they were growing at that point too. They did their lettuce mix and the microgreens and stuff like that. Not a lot.
And they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They're held up on they're held up on a pedestal, but they've never run restaurants.
No.
They've never worked with chefs before.
No.
We grow these greens. Hey, want to buy them? They're good. They are good.
And it was really difficult because I was so excited about the things that I was getting from them. I kept telling other chefs, it's like, you really need to do this because what they do is so wonderful that you really need to start buying from them. And they're like, yeah, but I can't get enough. And I said, well, that's the thing. You don't change the whole menu. Just pick one thing.
Right.
Just say this is our growing power salad, and then you don't have to worry about trying to flesh out your whole menu. What you're doing is just picking one thing, and as they grow and get better, it will be able to get more of that product, and it'll just translate into a larger part of your menu. So I think it's easy to take that baby step and go, we're going to do a couple of things on the menu that here's what we can bring in, here's what we can achieve. And I think you'll find once you start with that your customers will, those are the items that they're going to gravitate to. Those are the things that they're going to look for.
It's that old in Jacques Pepin's autobiography, My Apprentice, he talks about being a commis and, like the young kitchen helper, right? Like your parents basically drop you off at the big hotel and learn how to cook. And the kid next to him had essentially thrown away the herb stems. And in those days, the chef beat you, which is what happened to this kid. But the thinking was like, we waste nothing. You put that into an oil and it absorbs the flavors of the herbs, and we're going to use that. And so, Pepin would talk about like we threw away nothing. I mean, he's got a great line about it. It's like basically it was the air after they cut something got thrown away, but the rest, the bones, the everything was used because, and that's just, that's just cooking. But it is a creativity mindset, and if you're stuck in this is our menu and this is what people in the community have been coming to get for 30 years, it can be a tough, gosh, how do we twist up this whitefish dish, which don't come out of our Great Lakes anymore anyway, but that's a whole nother conference.
I think too, one of the things for me was there's so much going on in the big agribusiness, so many people that get sick. There's, you've seen it with lettuce and spinach where there's E. coli that people have gotten sick from, and if you're sourcing locally, sourcing?
You just created a new word.
Exactly.
Sourcing. Any food Jared Kelly, give her credit.
You have an exact trail of where that food has come from, and I just never, when I buy spinach from Growing Power, I don't worry about it having been infected by anything. When the avian flu wiped out and eggs started going up, I mean, even the ones that we were buying from Lynn, from Yuppie Hill, they went up, but not nearly as much as, in California, where a case of eggs was, $80. So if you're sourcing locally, then I do think you have, even though it seems like it's more expensive, I do think you have a little more control because they're more static, I think, than sometimes the broadline, the bigger producers.
Yeah.
I think it kind
And
of.
it's a big deal for pork, and you have raised all these clean animals, but like we're just on the other side of Christmas and Thanksgiving, but just under 500 million turkeys and chickens were put down because of avian flu. In this state, Minnesota, Iowa, Arkansas, I mean, it's an amazing number because of how they're raised and other fowl flying over and essentially defecating and passing on the flu. It wasn't the farmer's fault in the sense that it's not that they weren't running quote unquote clean operations.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, I think that even if they didn't have it, I think they ended up.
They incurred
Oh,
costs.
yeah,
They incurred costs and they didn't do
They
other things
euthanized anyway.
with
Yeah.
foodies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of costs that just incurred,
Yeah.
even if they weren't
Yeah.
infected.
Yeah. So, and I want to talk about the other side of having great seasonal, regional, local, organic, by the way, is a marketing term. The Secretary of Agriculture before Vilsack, when it became a legal term in 1986, said this is a marketing term. Just it's not really a designation, but anyway, that's another thing. It's another conference. I want to talk about greenwashing on menus, because I know you don't do it in your restaurants because I know you all and I know many of the farmers, the relationships. But it is something that happens where I walked into a restaurant that's connected to a hotel here. We'll just leave it alone last winter. And they listed all the things that came locally. And it was like, it's February. There is no effing way that those things came from those farms. I know these people. There is no way, and that happens on menus all the time. So how do you hedge against that? How do you express that we are getting these ingredients locally without making too broad of a statement, but then also having to change your chalkboard every day because maybe you don't have a chalkboard. Maybe that's not your style of restaurant. You know what I mean? Like, how do you approach that ethos? Because it's really a marketing thing in some ways too.
You know, on our end, our staff is just transparency. You know, we understand globalization is happening. Your salt is not coming locally. There's many spices and whatnot, and we understand that. And we don't take the approach of Bible thumping that 99 point, what this dish is 98 point whatever percent. It's just we share the story of what we do. We do our part. We think we do a good job with it, and we are happy to share the pieces that we can. And through that, if a customer asks, you know what, right now, did your greens come up and say, you know what, our source, unfortunately, you want a salad, it's a green salad, but unfortunately, no, this time it did not. You know, that there was a problem in the hoop house, it's negative 10 degrees, it just couldn't happen right now. And it's, you know, as long as you're honest with your customers, I feel like that's one of the biggest pieces. And then everything else, you know, that we do behind it, I think kind of speaks for itself, at least for where we're at today.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the neat thing about Wisconsin is we always assume that once the farmers markets dry up in the end of September, that there's no more local food. That's just not the case. I mean, prior to FedEx and what that, you know, we were allowed to get food year round, different locales. And so that's the same thing that that we do with our restaurants is we'll use a menu that's root vegetable heavy in the wintertime. And we'll be working with farmers with their blemish items during the height of the season to then have corn on the menu in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Not that it's fresh corn out of the cob, but it's all of a sudden there's 10,000 ears of corn that are going to go to the compost pile, or if we process them and we freeze them, now we can make corn soup in the wintertime. We can do processed tomatoes in the summertime and then use them in the wintertime. So the processing part is really the linchpin of local food to make it work on a number of different levels. And so it's really remarkable what is grown here throughout the year. There are farmers that still have carrots in the ground, and they'll have them under 2 feet of sawdust and stuff like that. They go out there and spread that aside and actually pick carrots in the middle of the daytime when the soil warms up from the sun. They can pick carrots that way. So there's just getting back to reconnecting people with their food is really kind of you know, having that strawberry puree on your plate in the middle of February. You know, it's not a fresh strawberry coming from a farm down in Argentina, but it's coming from a farm in, you know, next county over in the height of season in June that's preserved, you know, and then used in the
I mean, that's what people did.
Yeah.
That's what my grandparents did. You know, you had a root cellar, and that's where you kept. That's why they called it a root cellar, because that's where you kept that in the winter. And people canned and you know, froze and did those things. And we do the same thing in Meritage. You know, it's like we get corn in at the end of the season. We get a lot of corn in, and I'll take it all off the ears and we freeze it. The same thing with strawberries, rhubarb, all of that, because then in the middle of winter, when I want to make something like that, I'm still using a good local product that has great flavor.
And that's really where we talk about the economics of local food makes it work. When you use the blemish and second items that other farmers would actually put, you just plow into their field, is now being, you give them, you know, pennies on the dollar comparatively, but they're still getting money. Whether it's, you know, something like garlic scapes 10 years ago, you would not find garlic scapes. Every farmer would cut the garlic scape off, throw them in the field, and that'd be it. Now all of a sudden, they're $7 to $8 a pound for garlic scapes. Why? Because they're all selling. And it's something that just went into the ground. Nobody cared about it and stuff like that. So, you know, all these things that, you know, that you look at, how can we make efficiencies on the farm side and the restaurateur side to make this work? And there are a lot of ways to make it work. And so there's a lot of things that we can get back to what our cuisine should be. Our cuisine should be Midwest-based. We should not be a seafood and, you know, greens year-round based cuisine, because guess what? We have winter here, and we don't have salt water.
Right.
So that's what our cuisine should be based around. And so when you do that, then it makes it very easy to create a menu on that. And, you know, back to Dan's point about being creativity with it. So it's like that is holistically important to make it work. And nowadays, you can go on an industry corner and find good restaurants that do this. And 10 years ago, you'd be hard pressed to find that. Or 20 years ago, you'd only have to go to hotels, you know, with European chefs that did something like that. But now it's everywhere, which is great.
And I do think that because there's more restaurants doing that, it has made it easier, more affordable for restaurants to actually buy local or buy from farmers and do that. I think it certainly has become much more economical than it was 10, 12 years ago. I mean, it's just more available, and there's more action from the farmer side of people really wanting to do that and be there as a source for restaurants. Because I think that was the hardest thing for most farmers. It's like, well, I have all this stuff, how do I get it besides the farmer's market? And I love going to the farmer's market, but I don't always have time to do that either. So how do they get it to us? And now I think it's a lot easier to bridge that gap. As you said, once you deal with one farmer, then they're going to connect you to another and to another. It's just like any other business. It's just like restaurateurs know other restaurateurs, and lawyers know other lawyers. Well, farmers know other farmers, and this is what they do. And they're a community that helps each other. So they support each other really well. And then, as I said before, just having the RSA made it was a brilliant idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But it does make a huge difference in purchasing and making it easier for me. One-stop shopping is easier.
And one thing, like Jan said, Jan is our RSA as far as our chef that we work with. They don't have an ego. They put it aside. They want to work together with everybody. And that's really what it's about, because when you, our restaurateurs are very competitive. They're like, no way, I'm not going to use the same farm or whatever. I'm going to hide this farmer. I'm not going to tell anybody about this farmer because it's my farmer. That's not going to help the farmer. You want to get that stuff out to the public, to know about that farm, that those people can go buy those. So that's really that's that kind of competitive part and the ego part with it, or just the insecurity of it all. But if a carrot comes from the same farm and is delivered to these 3 restaurants on the same day, and goes on the menu that night, I don't think anybody here is going to be pissed off if you go to those restaurants and say, well, that XYZ carrot from that farm, that's why are you guys both using that? It's going to be used in a different way that you guys aren't even going to recognize it. And that's the creativity part of it. And that's just the reality part of our side of just the logistics of point A to point B.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that's, get over yourself, because we're trying to make a better food system here as far as Wisconsin and Milwaukee, not just promote one restaurant over the other. And so when, Jan can use our products like that, it's like we don't say it's Bray's product or Bray's RSA product. It comes from this farm. We have, 20 farms that have beets. Every bit of beets we get from all those farmers are all labeled with those farms. I mean, logistically, it's hard to do that, but it's something that some farms, some chefs may like a farm from this, grows a beet from this area because it's very different. We have very geographical areas that, from the Chillicothe area, items raised in that area are very different than from the glacial scraped mid-central Wisconsin. So items from those 2 areas are very different. And Dan may like a more minerality in his beet, and Jan may more with the fruit aspect in her beet. And that's fine. And so that's why we allow that to happen, because we don't want to, put everything together and aggregate all beets together and say, okay, this is a Wisconsin beet. That doesn't really do it, because chefs want to, have that thing where I want a beet the size of a golf ball, I want beet greens on there, I want this variety, whatever it may be. And that's, these farmers are able to do that to that level.
I think that the excitement of having something as simple as, like you're talking about carrots or beets or potatoes, and the flavor profile is so different than what you get if you just buy it from Cisco, whatever, or at the grocery store. I mean, it's amazing to me, and like you said, the differences between the flavors of where they come from. It's just a wonderful thing, and especially the potato always amazes me. How in the world just the good old-fashioned russet potato that comes out of the ground from here tastes like, oh God, it's so good, it's so fluffy and delicious, and you put it next to that other one and you go, well, that's just starch. But they come really dirty, and they're, you have to scrub a little bit. It doesn't come really clean, but the flavor is so much better. I mean, it's just amazing. You just almost don't want to do much to it because you want that flavor to shine. And it's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
It's
And
wonderful.
it's a takeaway, like if you have restaurants and you want the food to taste better, it will, if you follow this path. It takes more work. And I've worked in restaurants, never as a chef, so I want to be clear. I don't really know the life, but I've been around a lot of it. But it takes more work. Like it's easy to throw a flavoring salt combo on something so that it appeals to your customer's palate because engineers have figured that out. That's not that hard to do. And there are plenty of places that can keep doing that. But these ingredients, it literally will, your food will, even if you have a subpar cook, your food will taste better. Yeah, it's harder to screw it up to a certain extent.
And I think too, the yield is better. I mean, the growing power spinach, the spinach from the farmers, that holds up so much better than the stuff you get in that bag, a little, and it wilts down to nothing. You're gonna find when you cook that spinach, it still has volume, it still has flavor, and it's so much nicer on the plate. It actually has structure and volume to it. It looks great. And when you buy that other stuff, it just wilts away, it's gone, and it tastes like nothing. It doesn't have any flavor to it, it's just something green on your plate. Those things, I think, too, the yield is actually better for those products, even with the chickens that we get. And, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the yield is better, the byproduct is better as well, making stocks from animals that are actually pasture raised, whatever it may be, and Dan can attest to all that stuff as far as the animal husbandry that he does. And all that stuff that, you know, if you buy local animals and you don't make stock in your restaurant, you're throwing out a good part of it. When you buy a whole beet, if you just use the bulb of the beets and not use the stems, not use the leaves,
Right.
you're throwing out 20% of your profit center. And that's, you know, that's where you need to make the money at, because you need to turn those stems into something. You need to turn those greens into something. And with the local, I mean, you can even turn the roots into things as well, which we do. I mean, the peelings as well. I mean, we don't throw anything away. Back to Kyle's point, and that's really the economics behind it. And that's in true with anything, any part of the animal that comes as well from a quality animal. The resulting broth and stocks are made are much better. Everything is much better, and then that then goes to making the economies of scale work for us in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. Go
But
ahead.
when we make head cheese, we'll reduce down liquid and we use the gelatin property to thicken lobster sauces. We'll make just straight skin stocks out of pigs instead of making another chicken stock and buying more chicken backs. To go through those extra efforts we've really seen our cuisine and that price point go further for us as far as utilizing the land. And back to your point, Kyle, one of my favorite comments from our customers is, geez, what'd you put on this steak? What'd you put on this pork chop? Just salt and pepper.
Right. So we have enough time. Are there any questions? I hope there are for any of these chefs.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when we started the RSA, we received a grant through the state of Wisconsin through Buy Local by Wisconsin. So we then used that as the state borders being our definition of local. Even though in geographical sense, some farms in Illinois are closer in proximity. So that was when we ran under that grant for 2 years and how we defined local. And I still define it in that sense, because most of the people that come to the restaurant are from Wisconsin and kind of putting the economic impact back into the state of Wisconsin. It doesn't mean that we don't source from a few farms in Illinois, like the Nick Farm, which does great Italian varieties of greens, vegetables, stuff like that. But that's how I define it. But I don't, have any ill will to a chef that defines it differently. If they're sourcing some from, they're closer to Minneapolis and they're getting stuff from Minnesota, I don't have any ill will towards that of how they define it. That's their preference to that, but that's how I define it.
And my own personal, I remember in the early days I was eating in a restaurant, well, I'll just say it was Hinterland, and I said, this chicken is freaking fantastic. Who are you getting from it? Who are you getting from locally? And he said, I'm not. I couldn't find the amount of chicken that I needed at the quality that I want, so there's this terrific farm in Pennsylvania that I'm getting it from. And I was like, cool. I mean, it's great quality. He knows how well they take care of their chicken, and it's what he wanted. He's still supporting a farmer. Yeah, there's a little bit more petrodollars to get him here, but he planned his inventory and so forth. Like, that's legit as far as I'm concerned. They didn't come cut up in pieces and pre-flash frozen and I mean, it tastes like freaking chicken. It was delicious. And again, I said, what did you do to it? It's like, quick brine, heat, salt, pepper, butter. It's a roast chicken, dude. Yeah, it's supposed to taste delicious.
Yeah, and not everything, we've been through that process too, where not everything that comes from Wisconsin is going to be better. I mean, we worked with,
Well, I mean, most. Come on.
most things.
Yeah.
I mean, some people like, raising rabbits like that, we worked with them, it's like, okay, this is too tough, or this is, not quite the flavor profile we're looking for. And so then you work with them on that, and you get them to the point where they can raise something that is comparable to anything you can find in the country. And it does take a little time to get to that point, but just because right off the bat saying everything from Wisconsin is the best all be all, that's really not, I mean, kind of, walk into blinders on. It's not, but you can definitely, find some really great stuff out there.
Yeah. How do you, because you ship.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
one of my favorite chefs, James here, award-winning Wisconsin chef, and her definition was locals is big as your heart, which I thought was really interesting coming from this person. But for us, it's having that direct relationship, knowing the farmer from where the product's coming from, having some kind of personal relationship with that person. And one of my very good friends who taught me how to farm, his ranch he grew up on was in South Dakota. And we went out and picked up lambs, loaded them in the trailer, and drove them back to a farm here and finished them out. And to me, that was a direct relationship. And I shook a gentleman's hand who birthed those animals and had that relationship. So I think there's a lot to be said for knowing where your food comes from. Instead of just coming off the Cisco truck and it came from that southern Wisconsin or the southern part of the state.
Yeah.
So in the country, that to me is like the biggest aspect of it, knowing you can track it back to wherever you say it's coming from.
I have to shout out Luke Zaum, he's here with the Driftless Cafe, and he did a pop-up dinner the other night, but he told this great story about, he's got farmers that call that are Amish farmers, and when they, okay, we're all thinking, gosh, it's tough to get these fresh ingredients sometimes, right? It takes 2 nights to work. These farmers go to a telephone pole where there's a phone line, and they call the restaurant to tell Luke what they have that week. And if they don't pick up, they just keep calling. That's their one phone call for the day. But they had to travel some distance to get to the phone. And if nobody answers, it's not like they leave a message. They wait for Luke or his team to pick up the phone call. So there's two sides to it, but talk about a relationship, right?
Yeah, I've written to Amish farmers, Joe and I know it. We correspond via snail mail. Just write letters. Okay, I'll take 8 pigs this year. When you let me know when they're ready to process. And I receive a letter back that's 4 pages long, telling about where his kids are at, and the homeschooling and stuff like that. And, it was just like, I mean, that was like, I really didn't have time to read the letter, but at the end of the day, it's like, I'm glad I read that letter because it's one of those things that's what we do.
Right.
It's not just this, some person that's a different person every day delivering something to your food that you have no connection with. It's, back to Dan said, just having that relationship.
Right.
And so just knowing that, like what they go through, because anytime that a chef complains in my restaurant that the work is too hard, I say, okay, what farm do you want to work at next week? Let me know. Because I can go work for all week next at that farm. But come back here and wow, this is easy. Yeah, this is great. Because chores, at 8 hours, the kitchen clock ends. The farming clock does not end at 8 hours.
No.
So
It never ends.
It never ends.
Yeah, no shortage of.
Mass, we're just surrounded by this, but I would definitely not say we're at a saturation. I would say our saturation point is maybe 2% at this point. And when the Cisco trucks stop rolling around as hard as they are, I would say that we're starting to make a little bit of progress. I think there's miles and miles to go. And the way we get to connect with customers is educating our staff, and first of all, sharing our story and the passion with all the members of our team. And when you can get a server that can express every little bit about, I don't expect our service team to go out and remember the entire length of paragraphs that I explained to them, as long as they can remember just like 2 or 3 points. This is the name of the farmer, that picture on the wall, that guy's name is Ken, and Dan fished with him up on Washington Islands. Just some kind of connection that we can build. And off that, we do farm dinners. We do farm dinners both at the farm and in the restaurants, featured ingredients, use a lot of social media to connect with people.
Yeah, for us, it's, we're a restaurant first and foremost. And so what we try to do is give a quality meal, quality service, and let the diner go away with that. If they want to then talk and open a dialogue about where things come from, how things, how things are raised, or what we try to do, then we definitely have the ability to do that through staff training, like Dan says. But it's not, I'm going to steal the word of Bible thumping we talked about. We're not there on our soapbox, being like, okay, you have to think this way. If you don't think this way, you are unintelligent, you get out of the restaurant, you don't understand this, but that's not it. I mean, a lot of people don't need to go through that rigmarole just to have a good chicken. They just want to sit down, have a good glass of wine, and good chicken, and go. And that's what we're here for. That's our first and primary objective in the restaurant industry, is to do that. Then if they want to talk more about it when they come in on their second, and third, or fourth visit, then we're more than apt to do that on any level they want to. And that's how a lot of times things have happened with our best customers. It's just like, it's not that, we're not trying to create a sales pitch and try to hook them on the first
Right.
cold call.
I think most people, our customers ask, we have some customers that it matters, they want to know where it comes from, or, that kind of thing. And there's other customers that understand what we do and just understand that that's the way it is, and they're not going to ask a lot of questions. But it's the same thing, our staff knows the answers, and, unfortunately, I'm not a farmer, so I don't get to go fishing with farmers. I do see them and so on.
Invite you next time.
Yes.
Oh, well, I say Meritage, but Meritage is actually the proper pronunciation. It is a made-up word. It was a word created out of a contest. The California winemakers.
What was your other made-up word today? You're like on a roll.
I did not make up the word. It was actually, what happened was the California winemakers, red wine, the Bordeaux blend is a blend of 5 varietals. And unless it comes from Bordeaux, you can't call it that. So the California winemakers got tired of calling their wine, that was a Bordeaux style blend, red table wine. That's what they would put on it, or red blend. They wanted to come up with a better word. So they had a contest, and whoever won the contest was going to get wine for life and that kind of thing. So this group of winemakers had this contest, and the gentleman that won, he put marriage and heritage together. And that's how the word came out. And so when
And you're originally from California.
I'm originally from California.
Yeah, Jan's a transplant.
So when we started looking at buying the restaurant, and you have to have a name, and it was like, I don't know. I don't know why. Some people have a name for their restaurant, like you did, but, for a long time. They know exactly what they're going to do. I did not. So we started tossing around things, and that name just fit because I felt like it really described me. I kind of like to blend different cuisines together. I like to blend wine and food together, so it just seemed to fit. So that's where the name came from.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.